Rabbi Elio Dessler in Michtav Milio, fourth volume, page 129, writes, this is in Hebrew, I'm going to translate it into English as I go. Um, the, uh, the Any influence of Kedusha, of holiness, in Chutz La'aretz, which we experience, comes through the channel of those countries in which we live, through the character traits of that nation and the land in which the Jews are dwelling there. And the derech of that specific location's avodas Hashem emerges from the general qualities of that place. He gives examples, specific examples. He says Russians have very hot emotions, chamei haregesh, and the manner of avodas Hashem which developed in Russia was Chassidus. Lithuanians are cold and calculating, karimu mechushavim, and the matter of learning Torah which developed in their land was learning Torah in depth and learning Musar. The Germans are very meticulous in observing discipline and order, mishmat v'seder. And there, the avodas Hashem which developed was that of meticulous observance of tradition and customs. So to every golus used for the purpose of holiness, the tools and the mitos of the nation in which the people lived. And that is what Chazal call the influence of the sorim of the umos, of the malachim, who are in charge of each and every nation. The malachim in charge of each and every nation represent the spiritual, the potential for spiritual positive, I should say, for positive use of the spiritual qualities of that country. So the Am Yisrael was deliberately scattered all over the world in order to be able to absorb traits from the nations of the world where they are to be found and to use them for holiness. One of the big questions which exists to this very day, which is somewhat mysterious, is what is the unique trait of being American, which is supposed to be then absorbed into our avodas Hashem, which did not exist in prior countries. One is not required to find that trait, but it happens on its own. But obviously, we can identify, looking backwards, how each country had its own derech and avodas Hashem developed, which can last through the ages to this very day, and so repercussions, like we spoke about the past few days about Misnagdim and Chassidim, which can be boiled down in stereotypical terms, not accurate terms, to Litvaks and Galicianos. Rav Dessler, in another place, says an amazing thing, and I'm going to give you a handout with this, which is an article that I wrote, but you don't have to do the whole handout. This is on page 8 of the handout. Okay, so before don't look the rest of the handout at all. I want to share this with you. This is an art. Before I get there, though, in the first page of the handout, which look at, there's a famous mashal. I don't know if it's famous, but it's a mashal from the Satmar Rebbe. Satmar Rebbe said, once upon a time there was a family, and the father of the family would only eat fleshik. He'd only eat meat, cooked dishes cooked with meat. Their daughter then married a man who only ate milchik, dishes cooked with dairy. So what did the poor housewife do? She made 2 dining rooms, 2 kitchens and 2 dining rooms. One kitchen was the fleshik kitchen, the other kitchen was the milchik kitchen. One dining room was the meat dining room, and the other dining room was the dairy dining room. And the father ate separately, and the son-in-law ate separately, each in their own room. Eventually, the family became poor. They became impoverished. And when they became impoverished, they no longer could afford either true meat or true dairy. All they could afford was potatoes. That's it. Just potatoes. And for a while, they continued on with their custom, even though there was no meat, was no dairy. The father ate his potatoes in his room, and the son-in-law ate his potatoes in his room. until finally one day they realized, you know what, all we are small potatoes. We might as well get together and see what we can accomplish. So too, Satmar Rebbe said, there are no more real Hasidim, no more real Misnagdim. We're all potatoes. The fleshik is gone, the milchik is gone, we're all parv. So might as well get together and work together. Now, that's true to a large extent. That after the Holocaust, the greatness of movements which existed beforehand dissipated. It went away. But, Rav Dessler writes, and you can follow along with me on page 8, in talking about the theme which the Satmar Rebbe gave the mashal for, the potatoes, he says, in our times, the qualities of emes that personify the Bali Musar are already extinct. In other words, a rigorous and unrelenting quest of what's true and appropriate and right, we don't find that. We no longer find individuals whose hearts are full of with a profound truth, with a strong, true sense of cheshbon hanefesh. The a complete and rigorous reckoning of one's spiritual and status and progress. People don't look inside themselves, introspect is the right English word, to figure out what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's bad, where I've been and where I should go, what I should be doing, what I shouldn't, on a regular basis. We have reached the era of Ikvus and the Mashiach, the final generations before the coming of Mashiach. Generations that Chazal describe as superficial. And certainly as Americans, we are the most superficial of the superficial. If we find an individual who does learn Musar, we find he's primarily interested in the intellect of Musar, understanding ideas which are in the Musar, but not in the work inside the character of the Musar. The profound philosophy of psychology that are linked to Musar. Even if he learns Musar be spilus, with the emotional impact of nigun, the melody, and shinun, repetition, where we saw prescribed, which is almost non-existent, that somebody take a pasuk or a statement of Chazal, put it to a tune, and then sing it over and over again until finally made an emotional impact on a person's soul. Almost never happens nowadays. Musar Seder in a yeshiva, most yeshivas have Musar starting, but they are learning the text as opposed to working on their character. Really, does this activity lead to cheshbon hanefesh? Contemporary Chassidus lacks the component that was once at its core, avodas Hashem with dveikus. Real dveikus is missing. All it remains is external form of Chassidus, something that appears like hislavus. It looks like it's a flame. But again, it's superficial. Who knows what's happening on inside? There is a nigun, but the soul of the nigun is no longer. Hislavus and davening is almost a thing of the past. People should really get... I'm told that years ago, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, people cried freely in shuls. And perhaps even yeshivas. Nowadays, it's very rare that you see people crying during Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, even during Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, even during the Elah. We don't have that hislavus and davening which you once had. Now, elsewhere, in this essay, the page before, please turn to page 7. Rabbi Dessler, last paragraph, in the aforementioned essay, the essay which we're actually talking about now, expands considerably on the contrast between Musar and Chassidus, which I spoke about in the previous paragraphs, which I'm not going to do with you. He also makes another fascinating and controversial point. The extraordinary rigorous demands of self-critique and unrelenting emes imposed by Musar on its adherents made it irrelevant for common folk. Rousseau Salanter didn't believe that when he founded the Musar movement, but that's what developed over time, unfortunately. But besides that, the Litvak approach in general, the Misnagdic approach, doesn't do very much for common people because it's very intellectual, demanding, and cynical at the same time. They were not equipped, regular people, they were not equipped to engage in ongoing Musar type avodas Hashem. At best, they could realize a peripheral sense, like peripheral means not direct but indirect sense of covered Torah. Upon coming into contact with great individuals. In other words, it's like if you have a great Rosh Yeshiva, you can become a fan of that Rosh Yeshiva, and by extension, his intellect works for you as representing you, and you are involved and immersed in that because of your being a fan of this Rosh Yeshiva or this Rav. So that will work to a certain extent, but not directly on you. This was not enough to sustain these simpler people when confronted with the temptations of the contemporary, this is a quote, American, Australian, and South African milieus, locations, and atmospheres. Chassidus speaks much more to the common folk. He's Slavus, whether it's true or false, whether it's superficial or profound. Dancing and drinking, which is part of Chassidus, do not require intense soul searching. They are therefore better suited for the masses and help insulate the masses engaged therein against the onslaught of 20th century temptations. It's true. Chassidus has helped many people, and not by becoming a chassid who dresses the dress and walks the walk, talks the Zubrochen or English, the broken English talk. No, people like Shlomo Karlebach, they were spreading Chassidus. People like the contemporary singers, Mordechai Ben David, Eitan Katz, from Fried, they're all Chassidim. If they're not real Chassidim, they are using the tools of Chassidim in order to inspire people, uplift them. And there's no big stress on know yourself and dig deep inside yourself. That's not there. Okay, let's go back now to page 8. For today's era, there remains only one alternative. Take up everything and anything that can be an aid of to Yadus, the wisdom of both Musar and Chassidus together. Again, Musar is a type of Misnagdus. Okay, in the essay itself, I got into what's Musar and non-Musar Misnagdus, not important. Just think of it as the Litvisha Misnagdusha approach. Perhaps together they can inspire us to great understandings and illuminations. Perhaps together they might open within us reverence and appreciation of our Holy Torah. Perhaps the arousal of Musar can bring us to a little Chassidic Slavus. And perhaps these Slavus will somewhat fortify one for a Cheshbon Nefesh. Perhaps through all these means together, we may merit to ascend in spirituality and strengthen our position as B'nai Torah, adherents of a Torah-centered lifestyle, with an intensified Judaism. May God assist us to attain all this. The last paragraph here is about how in Europe, very often, Chassidim Misnagdim didn't interact at all. But now we're all thrown together. We all have the potatoes together in the same place. So therefore, we should look at these tools which previous generations used, which can speak to our hearts. And it doesn't matter where they come from, whether from Lithuania or from Galicia, whether Chassidus or Misnagdus, whether Chabad or Brisk, whether Musar or the religious Zionism. Whatever way you go, wherever you go, there's something positive which you can get and use in your Avodas Hashem. I'd like to besides the notes, which hopefully will be not overburdening, if you are able to put down in a sentence or two what speaks to your soul more, Chassidus, Misnagdus, and why, I'd appreciate that. And I think it would be a good exercise for you as well. And that is a good way to end up this penultimate means the second to last week of the year. Shabbos.